President Trump going to war, at least a war of words, with former FBI Director James Comey, calling him a criminal. But Comey ain't backing down. He's in for a fight. Just an hour ago, special report anchor Bret Baier interviewed Comey about everything from the Hillary Clinton email investigation to Andrew McCabe's firing. But it's what he said about the information he spilled to a friend to get the special counsel started. That could get James Comey in the most trouble. Watch.
At what point were you made aware that some of the information was classified by the FBI?
Which information?
In the memos.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. Sometime after I was fired, the FBI apparently made a decision that there were some words in at least two of the memos, maybe one, I think two, that were diplomatically sensitive. And so my lawyers returned them to the FBI.
But they were just your journal entries. Like, are you there, God? It's me, Jim. So was that information classified? That is the important question. Now, this morning on Fox and Friends, the president made it very clear what he thinks.
Look, Comey is a leaker and he's a liar. And not only on this stuff, he's been leaking for years. Well, Comey, what he did, Brian, was terrible. He leaked classified information in order to try and get a special counsel. He also leaked the memos, which are classified. Nobody unclassified them. And those memos were about me, and they're phony memos. This is a big mistake, this book. He is guilty of crimes. And if we had a Justice Department that was doing their job,
well, then maybe we'd have a different attorney general. More on that later in the show as well. So did James Comey leak classified information? And is that a criminal act? Let me go to my hurricane-proof party panel. She's a townhall.com editor and Fox News contributor. Katie Pavlich is here, along with comedian Joe DeVito. And she's a correspondent on The Greg Gutfeld Show and a decorated writer, Katherine Timpf, in the house. Welcome, everyone.
Hey.
So James Comey, did he commit a criminal act by writing these long-winded memos that he now says are journal entries, conveniently changing the terms of these missives, and then having his friend, who at one time was working at the FBI, sprinkle them like seeds throughout the media garden?
He didn't even say journal entries. He said diary entries, which I don't know. I thought diaries are for girls. I think journals are for boys, but I don't know. He kind of came off in this interview reminding me of Officer Barbrady, the cop from South Park. He was just like, duh, I don't recall. From what I recall, when he said he hadn't heard of any of the DNC funding the dossier except through the media, and then he said he'd heard that the Republicans had funded it. We're well asked would he have heard that, but the media, especially because he himself said that he didn't look into it himself. So he just doesn't come off as a very credible interview when he doesn't seem to know what he's talking about, or pretending that he doesn't.
That's a really good point, and this is something that has been an issue for agents at the FBI, is when he talks and when he weasels his way out of stuff, he sounds a lot more like a lawyer than he does like a cop. Because if a cop were doing an investigation, a cop would ask pretty basic questions. Where do you get this? How did you get this information? Why were you working with this person? Some pretty thin basics that were not covered at all, at least according to him, in this account.
Yeah, he seems like the least inquisitive FBI director you could think of, where he's, oh yeah, I hadn't really thought about that. Well, in his defense, his diary did have that little tiny metal lock on it, though, and he was writing in the pen with a big fluffy part on the end of it. Yeah, he does not come across well in the interviews. It is interesting to see how the left loves a defector. They love a defector from the... As soon as someone stands up to Trump, suddenly, oh, we have to listen to what this person says. And if you look at the way they treated people like John McCain and Mitt Romney, when they were just regular Republicans, they were blood-spattered war criminals. And you remember Joe Biden said to a black audience that Romney was going to put you back in chains. But now that they oppose the president, of course, suddenly they're elder statesmen. And they're trying to do the same thing with James Comey, and no one's buying it. He does not come across as credible.
And it's interesting because he doesn't have satisfactory answers when he talks about Loretta Lynch. And I think, that's what could be most problematic because, when he's talking about the Hillary Clinton email investigation, at one point he says he knew the conclusion long before he had finished writing the book. Right. And in another account, he says, and tonight with Bret Baier especially, he says that he didn't trust that the DOJ was going to charge Hillary Clinton. He's also said that Loretta Lynch was classified, or was compromised rather, and there was some classified information information that would show that she was playing goalie for Hillary Clinton and the DNC.
And it's also not the FBI's job to decide if someone's going to be prosecuted or not. That is the DOJ's job. It is the FBI's job to present evidence and then allow the attorneys, the U.S. attorneys in particular, to decide if they're going to prosecute. But there's a reason why James Comey has a team of lawyers and why he keeps hiring new high-profile lawyers, because he is in trouble. Tonight when he talked about the classified memos with Brett Baer, I thought it was very interesting that he would admit that he had multiple copies of the memos and he took one home.
Yeah, to put in his safe.
To put in his safe.
But hey, if it's a diary entry, I mean, I don't know about you, do you keep your diary in your safe?
And he tried to argue that, you know, he leaked the information as a private citizen rather than as the director of the FBI, but that doesn't make it any different. In fact, I would say that actually might make it worse, because he was handling classified information not as the director of the FBI anymore. And the thing is, there is a criminal investigation going on into his leaking. He says it's not leaking because he gave it to a friend. But if it really is not a leak and it wasn't so serious, then why couldn't he just do it himself?
Also, if he took it home and it's his diary, that means he was writing his diary at work, which is not what the taxpayers pay him to do.
Absolutely not. What a superfluous activity.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is so incredibly right. No, but the whole thing is so confusing, because you know something you write, something you author can later be classified. If there's one thing we learned from the entire Hillary Clinton investigation, it's that Hillary Clinton could have changed the classification, so could James Comey have changed it, and it was later changed to have some sort of a classification that meant that it was not for prying eyes.
He knows that. All he can do now, though, is just say it was his diary. That's his best bet.
He wrote that. If you look at the memos that were released last week, the first page of those memos has him writing to the FBI agents who were copied, including Andrew McCabe, saying, I know that these are probably classified. I've labeled them secret. If it needs to be a different classification, please let me know. So he's admitting that he understands that conversations between him as the FBI director and the President of the United States are pretty sensitive and should be classified, and yet now he's trying to argue that, oh, maybe there were a few words that the FBI decided were classified, when he knew from the beginning he was handling
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's a few words. That word parsing right there, that is so Hillary-esque. And it is a little bit unnerving, makes me mildly nauseous. This morning on Fox and Friends, the president also appeared to distance himself from his personal attorney, Michael Cohen, saying Cohen only did a tiny fraction of his legal work. He also did admit something for the very first time. Listen.
He represents me, like with this crazy Stormy Daniels deal. He represented me, and, you know, from what I see, he did absolutely nothing wrong.
President Trump had previously denied that he knew anything about Cohen's deal to pay Stormy Daniels $130,000 to keep quiet about an alleged affair in 2006. So what should the president do about Cohen now? This is really interesting, because a lot of people are playing gotcha, saying, see, the president is saying that Cohen was doing Stormy Daniels' work. He could know that Michael Cohen was the fixer and say, don't tell me anything about it. I don't want to know. Just make it go away.
Right, but I think that
is that too problematic?
I don't know. I don't really care about this story at all, the Stormy Daniels thing. I'm so sick of hearing about Stormy Daniels, and I think a lot of people feel the same way.
Unless they're paying to see her jebblies in a strip club.
Right,
I agree
absolutely.
with you.
Well, there's that, but I do not fall into that category. I think that President Trump would be better off just not talking about it at all.
Yeah.
For his sake and for Michael Cohen's sake.
No, but every time he makes a slip like this, Robert Mueller is like, please, 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 just talk to me. Please, 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 please. I can get you to say one thing, and it'll make your whole life unravel. And that's what they really want.
Yeah, this was a particularly hilarious filibuster by the president this morning. Very funny. But it's
filibuster.
Yeah, I hate to say this, refreshing to hear the way he talks when you compare it to Comey, who acts like, oh, I don't know nothing about nothing.
Maybe it's possible.
Yeah, and Hillary Clinton, who's still struggling to speak like a human being, and the president just comes out and just barfs out all this. And I hate to say it, but I can't wait to see what he's going to say next. And I know that's not something you look for in a president, but what are they going to get him on with this? Does this? Okay, so he fooled around with a porn star. Does this change anyone's opinion?
I mean, Katie,
on him?
who hasn't?
I mean, I'm not going to comment. I take the fifth on that one, for sure.
It's free.
No, but I think you're right about people thinking it's refreshing for him to just say what's on his mind. However, when you're barfing out information, when you are under... The president is not under criminal investigation. However, when there are criminal investigators looking at everything he is saying closely because he has a relationship with Michael Cohen, the prosecutors working in court today on the Cohen case, took the words from the Fox and Friends interview and put them into the record in court. So they are paying attention to it closely.
Yes.
And although he should be able to speak his mind and say things honestly, and as they say, let Trump be Trump, there are legal consequences for that. And so you have to balance what's worth
and
more.
that's, you know, to Joe's point, that's what makes the whole thing so insane, because you don't know how it's going to end.
Right, true.
He could be, believe it or not, one of the most popular two-term presidents ever in the history of this country.
Until Kanye runs. And then...
Yeah, but not till 2024. He even said it. Or he could be removed
And
from
then
office.
even all this, what if he's the president who solves the Korean crisis?
What if we have to go right now? That's right. He might be. And we're going to talk about that later in the show. The panel is also going to return. But first up, Bill Cosby found guilty of sexual assault. You're not going to believe how Cliff Huxtable reacted in the courtroom.